Hello, and welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about the alchemy of vulnerable communication. And we were kind of giggling about this title because it sounds, I don't know, kind of nerdy.
I love it.
But we really mean it. We have been communicating a lot. Sometimes it's gone great.
Sometimes too much.
Sometimes too much. Sometimes it's gone, I would say, catastrophically. Maybe that's too dramatic. But it just feels like it keeps coming down to the more vulnerable, which really just means truthful. The more truthful, vulnerable we share from our heart, it goes great. And we were just saying the alchemy, the agent of alchemy is the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth transforms.
I like to try and look at vulnerability. If we could just maybe spend a second to talk about what that is.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? So I think when we think of vulnerability, I think depending on who we are, we see it a little differently. But a lot of men will probably see it as kind of a weakness type thing. They may say that they're open to being vulnerable, but they most likely aren't super comfortable, because to be vulnerable, you must be uncomfortable in that area, right? You have to be. Otherwise, you're not being vulnerable. You're just being candid. You're just being straight, right?
Oh, drop the mic moment. Drop the mic. That's huge what you just said.
Yeah, you have to feel threatened by something in order to that actually right before we went live, I said vulnerability isn't real because it's based in fear or threats that don't exist.
Yeah.
However, there is a point in time where vulnerability is really important for us to learn a whole heap of lessons. Basically, if we haven't really been vulnerable before, we should learn it, right? So we will do that. And as part of our journey to eventually also to reach a state where vulnerability isn't a thing because there's nothing to protect from.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Or there's nothing that needs to be protected. So,
yes. And it's interesting what you're saying because I get excited in a way to be vulnerable because I know it's the highest order. I know that just being truthful and transparent is the highest and best way to be. And anything that I might feel shame or embarrassed about, I want to lean into that and just
say that too, even. Right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's a better way to see a vulnerability actually is transparency. Like,
yes,
you're just being transparent. There's no problem or there's no, like, you're not taking off your armor. You're just letting people see you. Right. So
yeah, the feeling of vulnerability comes from, oh, maybe what I'm sharing is going to be judged. Maybe what I'm sharing could be used against me. Maybe what I'm sharing, someone will think is shameful. Maybe I'm like putting my cards out on the table and I'm going to feel vulnerable. So
maybe they'll take advantage of me somehow.
Yeah. But my experience is being vulnerable, being truthful is so freeing. Mm-hmm. And always helps to bring situations to the highest and best. And often when you are vulnerable, quote unquote, vulnerable, the other person is contagious. The other person is more likely to be vulnerable too.
Yeah.
So maybe if it's okay, I'll just share an example of what we're talking about and sort of the differences in outcomes that happened from the way I was communicating with you. So recently, my human was feeling a lot about your marital situation. You've been living apart from your wife for about 18 months. And in Canada, you have to live apart, I think, for at least a year in order to then start divorce proceedings. But the divorce proceedings hadn't yet been started, and my human was feeling sad, basically, around all of that. And the way I initially brought it up with you, I don't think was so vulnerable in a way. It was, I was in my thinking mind. I was kind of like talking about reasons, rationalizations of why it seemed the divorce might be a good idea. But I wasn't totally, I think, speaking from my heart about it. And eventually, and then our communication ended up didn't feel so great. It was, I don't know, the minds were like, the egos were just talking in a way, I guess, maybe I would say is what it felt like. And then eventually I got more into my heart about all of it. And I spoke from my heart, and, which was what was really painful for me, was just what was in my heart about it. And what I ended up saying to you was, it feels really painful to me because like you're legally married to someone else, and I would like to be married to you. And I don't know if we'll actually legally marry or not, from our own perspective. I'm not sure that would ever happen anyway, but that's what my human felt. My human felt like someone else has what I want, some other woman, and to honor her, she's a wonderful woman and the mother of your children, and you were together for many years, not to disrespect any of that at all. But my human felt like, oh, someone else has what I want. I would like at least the opportunity to be married to you, and not another woman have that opportunity. And that was kind of like, that's what was really in my heart about it. Like that pain. And once I expressed that to you, it felt like the communication went a lot better. And you said some things I felt like from your heart about it that were very loving. And so basically I felt like the interaction and the energy alchemized from something that was kind of frictiony and egoic to something that felt very loving and like understanding towards each other.
Yeah. I think when we're in the thinking and all the reasons and stuff, we're kind of in like defense mode a little. Like we're in like, I have this position that I want to offer, and I know that there might be some opposition to this, or it might be uncomfortable. So I'm going to make sure I have my reasons and my stuff in place. And I think when we approach someone like that, like they're going to feel a little like I think I said to you before or after that it just felt sort of like I'm trying to be convinced of something. And I'm just a little wary of that type of engagement. And so and that's my ego, my fear, like that comes up of like, oh, am I being tricked into something? Am I like, and it's weird because Tassel doesn't do that, but it's that story still comes up for me. So then I get a little defensive because the behavior to me seems a bit off, like something's off a bit. And I think it's just what Tassel said, that just more coming from the sort of the reasons around it, which I could appreciate. And I said after as well that there was a bunch of wisdom in them, in the way some of the things that were expressed. It was just how the approach came off at first was like challenging a little bit for me.
And it was also, I can see in this moment, I didn't really realize it until just now, is that it felt hard for me to say to you that I would like to be married to you, because maybe you've never said that to me. And you've even said, because of kind of past experiences that you were a little bit scared of being married, or not, I don't know if scared is the right word, wary of it, or maybe you felt like pressure to be married before or something. So when I really think about it, I think part of the reason I hadn't really gone to that true feeling and that true truth was it felt really vulnerable because you hadn't said that to me. And I'd actually said more of the opposite. So then for me to be like, well, I would like to marry you, felt really hard to say. It felt really vulnerable.
Yeah. And that's, I think, why we tend to go the other way first sometimes, right? Is especially when it's really hard for us. We'll kind of just, it looks a little safer to go the other way, I think.
I didn't have to like show all my cards.
Yeah. But I think like, I don't know. I think we can sense when something's off about it, like with each other. And so I think, like we're saying, just, I think vulnerability is the best way to go. And then just let the cards fall as they may, sort of, right?
Yeah. And one thing I want to sort of share from the feminine, the divine feminine side, that maybe the masculine, divine masculine side might not really understand is because you've talked about how maybe in some of your male Western cultural programming, like, oh, don't let them know that you like them, because then they'll have power or something, and they might leave. I'm not sure how that thinking works, because I don't think that's actually the truth.
I don't know.
Because what I want to say is, at least for me, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. The more I sense or hear that I am important to you, the more I come in. I mean, the more I'm like, oh, he's my guy. Like, the more vulnerable you are with me, the more secure I feel, and the more I feel that I can be that way with you. It does the opposite of what you have described as the programming. To me, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I don't. That doesn't actually come up for me anymore. But it was just the idea of, you don't want to be too nice. You want to kind of keep them wanting or something. That was the idea, I think. I don't really know what it was, but I saw that in media and stuff growing up, and like the jerk gets the girl type or orientations. I don't know. And I saw a lot of evidence of that in my, like, growing up. Like, the nice guys didn't often get the girls as much when I was growing up. So being nice and overtly expressive and all of those things were not things that seemed to be valued by people in my generation, or that people I was around, or whatever it was. It could have just been my particular environment. I don't know. But
yeah, no, I think.
But I don't believe any of that or follow that, or, even when I noticed it, I was like, that's just backwards. But I did develop a lot of the weakness type thing, like where it's just, I don't want to be seen as weak. It's not about maintaining a power in the relationship in any way or any of that. It's more of I'm supposed to be strong, and being weak, vulnerable is an area that I feel weak in. And to express it then is just expressing weakness. So that's a harder one for men, I think, to get past sometimes.
Yeah. What's so interesting is that the more I get to know you and the more open and vulnerable you've been with me, the more I realize we have the same feelings. I think in my own programming, I also thought, oh, men feel differently about things. And I'm not trying to say, not trying to gloss over and say men women are necessarily exactly the same.
I think it's more similar than we realize, but it's still very unique.
Yes, I think there's unique ways to each gender. But I think what I've seen is, oh my gosh, it's so much more similar than I thought.
Yeah.
Just the sensitivities and the ways we might feel hurt or what really is meaningful. I think in my generation, I'm in my 50s. So a lot of the men that I dated, would be in their 50s now. And even more so than in your generation, they really were taught this like Marlboro man of like stoic and not expressive and, strong, quote unquote. I see strong as now like being able to feel your feelings. So it's just really interesting. And like the way you feel is it's very similar to how I feel.
That generation of men would have been my generation's fathers primarily, right?
Yes.
So yes, it makes so much sense that I got that idea from all the powerful men that I would see.
Yes.
That were already established as I grew up.
Yes.
Were sort of in that type of persona.
And actually after my divorce, I found I seemed to just sort of resonate more with younger men emotionally than I did with men my own age. I think they had not been programmed quite as severely as men of my exact generation. So yeah, and I just want to say, like, there's just so much freedom in transparency. You're not hiding anything. There's no internal conflict. There's no hiding. And there's no secrets.
It's through continuously being vulnerable that you can feel that your partner will accept you, which allows you to dissolve all the vulnerability feeling. So now we're just feeling safe to be as we are.
Yeah.
And so now we're not even going to feel the discomfort of, like, we'll get to a place where there's not even discomfort about expressing it because we just feel safe already. So that's sort of the goal. And it's through being vulnerable that you eventually get there. And so there's areas where Tassel and I are already there. Basically, there's like different categories of stuff. And then there are areas that we each are still having some difficulty in, whatever. And we just keep moving towards vulnerability and openness, which helps us use that alchemy of truth, basically, to transmute all of that and see it all. That's sort of how we clean ourselves up a bit, right? And then,
yes,
we can have more peace after each one of those.
And I'm just curious, I don't know if you feel like answering this. What aspects do you still feel like for you're coming to more vulnerable transparency about?
Oh, I don't know. For me, it's a more of a contextual thing, but it's more of a question of, is it appropriate for me to be vulnerable? Am I trying to manipulate the situation by being vulnerable? Like, am I trying to, like, what am I doing with my expression? That's always my go-to, I guess, is just what am I doing with this expression? What am I looking for with this? Is it coming from a pure place, or is it coming from a place of like, I'm trying to get something to change in you, or what am I doing with this? That's where I care to focus. So regardless of the category, but then also if you ask a question, I tend to really want to be able to give you the honest answer too. So I'll tell you what you ask, but when I'm sort of choosing, like, so I can be vulnerable then just because you've asked and I'll tell you. But if you haven't asked and I'm sort of deciding what to be vulnerable with or share, it's not the vulnerability itself for me that makes me discern if I should or shouldn't. It's more how vulnerable do I feel with it, which is an indicator to move towards it, probably. because the more vulnerable I feel, the more fear is there for me to help let go of. But what am I doing with it? Like, or can I just notice I feel vulnerable here and let it go? Like, I don't necessarily have to engage in anything to feel that this is resolved in me. So it sort of depends on, like, is there something here that's valuable for both of us to talk about, I think. And then I have to trust that I'm doing that correctly. And then also, are there things that I'm just trying to say that are kind of just, I don't like this. Like, that might be vulnerable, but it also might just be coming from a place of me feeling lackful or, you know, something like that. And it's okay that I'm feeling that way, but I don't necessarily have to address it in that way. I don't have to express that. If I see a solution, I can maybe go that way. And this is the ideal, right? I don't do this every time. This is just the ideal, right? How I see it ideally. If I'm not triggered and stuff, or if I'm, you know, if I'm in a right state of mind, we could say that this is how I would try to approach it, and how I'd probably recommend people try to approach it, because I found this to be best in trying to do this actually with all expressions. Just like, what am I doing with this? And just noticing it, like, because there's so many of our expressions that we're doing to like get stuff and change people and do things. It's very interesting how unconscious we are about that. So for me, I've found a lot of value in just priming myself to question why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, what am I doing here? What's my intention? And is my intention pure? Because if my intention isn't pure, then I have to adjust that. I have to look at this differently. My intention is just to make myself feel better, then it's understandable to have an intention for comfort. But perhaps, like, in my journey, I've learned that intending for comfort is trying to usually avoid a lesson that's just right there trying to be learned, that's just going to come back again. So why not just step into it? And then as I go through the lesson, it just, for me, it becomes sort of apparent to me whether the lesson is just for me to learn to let go of something and surrender, or if it's to learn to be expressive, or what it is. I just try to do that. And sometimes I don't make necessarily like the right calls, right? Like, I might not mention something that's important to mention, or I might say something really somewhat radical that, like, I said my sexuality is changing just randomly, for example. That's kind of a radical thing to just say. And so I wasn't thinking about it. I was just sharing. I was being vulnerable. I was trying to be open. So it was a good thing, but at the same time, it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have just dropped that in a text randomly at dinner time. You know, just I could have done that differently. So that stuff too is important. Just am I oversharing? Not because I'm bothering them with how much I'm giving them, but because, like, I haven't fleshed out even what I'm talking about. Maybe I should like figure out what I'm saying a little before I just drop it on someone, right? Like, there can be some like mindlessness a little bit to my sharing. If I feel really open, I can just sort of go. So I'm learning about that as well. But it's, for me, it's all about what's my intention. What's my intention with this vulnerability? And do I need to express, like, does this feel important to express? And why does it feel important? Is it just feel important because I don't like it and I really want to say that I don't like it? If I really, really want to say something, then I can already know that, like, there's something there driving me to do that, to defend something or protect something or whatever. So it's the vulnerability that we then use to sort of get people to provide us safety from that vulnerability, is sort of how we do it. We'll say, like, I feel like you might leave me if you go dancing. And then I might basically go on a whole thing about just how crazy it is for me and stuff. instead of giving you space to go do what you want to do, right? Which is, I think, more what I did. I did express that I didn't really like it because I thought I should be transparent about it. But also I expressed that I wanted you to go and I thought you should go and all that too. But I could have went the other way, which is what some people do. And this is what I'm sort of advocating against. And I'm kind of exaggerating it a bit, but basically being like, oh, I would never do that. And I'm, I can't sleep forever. And I'm, the whole world is gray and the colors are gone from the world. And you don't love me. And, if you did love me, then you wouldn't do this. And you don't care how I feel. And if you did care, then you'd do this. Like that type of stuff, which could happen pretty easily. But the reason we're saying that is because we want them not to do the thing that makes us vulnerable. So we're trying to say, look how weak I am here a little bit. Can you help protect me from this?
And I see, and I'm sure you do too, there's different energies in the two examples you just gave. Like the first example, you're just being honest. You're being factual. This is uncomfortable for me, but please do what you want. And I can see, and I think for you too, I can see how someone might be worried, oh, me being transparent here, maybe I'm going to somewhat inadvertently influence my partner's decision-making. And I think what I just want to say here is, I think we can trust the sovereignty of our partner, that they can take in your transparency and then move it through their guidance and come up to, okay, what is the highest and best for all here? And that's what ended up happening.
Yeah. And if you don't talk about it, there's no opportunity for the partner to even consider what's going on, right? Yes. If you don't mention it at all, then of course they're not fully aware. They may notice that you don't like it, but they don't really know what that means, right?
And then they're just often can just be an undercurrent of sort of resentment or some distance or some hurt when we're not, quote unquote, vulnerable and transparent in this way.
Yeah, we don't feel safe, so we close off a bit.
Yes. So to me, the definition of intimacy is truth. Intimacy to me means there is truth.
Boom.
Transparency.
Drop the mic. It's 2 drop the mics.
Yeah.
One stream. 2 for 1.
Yeah. Intimacy to me just means truth and transparency.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And that explains too why, you've had some conversations with people that were sort of I guess just ones I wanted you to have with me. Right. And we talked about this before. It was a way back. It's not a big deal at all, of course. But I think that's why it kind of got me, as I was like, these are intimate things. And intimacy to me, I kind of don't want to share it. Right?
Yes.
Or a part of me doesn't want to share it. So even just being able to say stuff like that is vulnerable, right? To say, it's not for me anymore, but I mean, it would have been in the past for me to, I think I did say something, I think. Yeah. And I didn't say anything bad. I just said, I think I said I was a little bit disappointed that you talked to somebody else instead of me.
I think a lot of men in our culture may feel a bit uncomfortable saying something like that there's, I don't know, something too vulnerable about it, or it's too much, too feeling or something, but
we're not. It's sort of like it's kind of this feeling that we're just not really supposed to talk about what hurts us.
Right.
We're not supposed to talk about.
Not supposed to admit that you're affected.
We're supposed to just be strong and stand in it and be strong is sort of the idea.
Right.
We are courageous and brave through it, whatever it is.
Right.
But and we stay strong.
Yeah.
And we want to be seen that way too. That's kind of how we want to be seen, or at least in my programming, we want to be seen as a strong kind of protector. How am I going to be seen as a protector if I'm so weak? These types of thoughts might come through. I don't really experience them as much anymore, but I do still get whispers of them from time to time. But that's a big thing also.
Yeah. And, there's this phrase like emotional affairs where there hasn't been anything physical between two people, but there's an intimacy, there's an emotional intimacy, there's a sharing of truth, secrets, dreams, whatever.
I think I even compared it to this when we talked about it. Yeah, I think I said, I know this is not what it was, but it feels like kind of a trespass, like an emotional affair or something.
Yes.
And I didn't know how to handle all that. And it was actually new for me to really care so much too. So
right.
It was
and it was new for me and really positive that someone that you did care. That was new for me. I don't think I've really had.
You can't just run off gallivanting with all your boys. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't think I've had any real intimacy in any relationship before you, basically, like physically or emotionally or spiritually. So, yeah. So I think what we're saying here is vulnerable communication brings so many gifts.
It is A-okay.
Including intimacy.
Yeah, that's sort of the product of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just feel closer. Usually after any of our thingies, our challenges or opportunities.
Yeah.
We tend to feel closer after.
Yes.
And better, lighter. And then something else comes up.
And it's often the initiations, the expansions we're going through are around being vulnerable. It's around showing something to each other. Usually about like our desire for closeness. It usually is what it is.
Yeah. And I've noticed if we're avoiding the truth at all, it just gets worse and worse in the conversation.
Yeah.
So like we have a conversation that begins in fear, which is beginning in like not truth, right?
Right.
It's a real feeling coming up, but the truth or the foundation of it is a foundation of like mistrust or misfaith or fear, falsity of some kind.
Yes. Yes.
And so then the universe reflects back to you. That's crazy talk, right? Like, but they do it through you or through me, like amplifying it. Like, oh, I feel it, and I got you, sister. We're afraid now.
Right. Right.
And then I'm like, I'm also terrified of you. So, right. And then you're like, oh, but I'm terrified of you now. And that's basically what happens. And then we're simplifying it to an amazingly low degree. Of course, there's so much more context to every moment, but that's at essence, that's what's going on. And it's really silly to look at it like that. But that's what's happening. And we're just playing off each other's fears because neither of us are choosing to be the vulnerable, open one in that moment. We'll get there, but we have to keep this cycle going till we're like, someone has to stop this nonsense.
Yeah.
And one of us will do that. When one of us realizes, one of us will step back in and open and say vulnerable stuff, and then it fixes everything. So and that's the routine. So it's just about noticing, how can I be vulnerable here? Like if I'm upset, how can I be vulnerable here to seek a resolution?
Yes.
It might be a really good way to try to entrain, like how, whenever I'm upset about something that I feel I want to talk about, how can I be vulnerable here to find a solution?
I just thought of the other night when I was upset because you had put one of the kids to bed and then it got really late. And I led with like being upset. But what I realized, I could have led with, oh my gosh, I feel sad because I just really wanted to spend time with you. And that would have been the truth. That was underneath everything. And that would have been vulnerable and probably would have landed a lot better.
Yeah. Like, and even on my side, I could have noticed, because at the true core of it, I knew what the issue was. the issue is that you wanted to be with me. It's a nice thing. It's not, it's not a problem that you care about me and want to spend time with me.
Yeah.
Right. So, but when it comes across with the negativity, then I seem to experience the negativity. And unless I'm present enough to go, I see what this is. I see this for what it is. I love you too. And I'll try to spend more time with you and do this better going forward or something. Instead, I feel attacked, and then I'm like, no, I got to defend my position. Like, I was just putting my son to bed, and I didn't realize how long it had been and stuff too.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm very ignorant of what's going on, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want all this fear, or that type of thing, and that's a little judgmental so one of us has to notice, basically, or ideally, whoever's initially having the thing discerns for themselves, how can I approach this positively instead of highlighting there is negativity here. I feel stuff I don't really like about this whole thing. Yes. And I can express that stuff, but probably if I start with the better or the outcome oriented sort of positive, what can we do to expand this together type approach first, and then say, like, here's some of the whys if they're needed. Like, you may find that the partner just is like on board with whatever you want it. Like, for me anyway, I'm generally like on board to do whatever feels best, and unless I'm opposed, and then we talk about it. But I'm pretty, at least for me, I'm pretty like that. I think a lot of couples are sort of like that. I think you're also similar to that. Like, if I really want to do something a certain way, you're probably going to try and see if that can work, right? Like, we both want the same thing. So it's sort of like remembering that.
Yes. And I really like this idea of, okay, if I am going to say something, what is the most vulnerable thing I could say? Like, what is the deepest truth here?
What's the scariest thing?
Yeah, might feel a little like vulnerable to say. Can I do that? I would love to just always do that. Yeah,
it's fun
because it's just it can, to the ego. So what it is I think you might feel hurt in the moment, which is why the upset is happening. And so the ego wants to protect itself. And so the ego is more comfortable in anger.
It feels disempowered a little bit.
Because it wants to like reestablish like its power and its distance a bit too. It wants to kind of create a little bit of distance in a way from the pain.
And also the momentum or the energy to maintain falsity like that draws on itself. Mm-hmm. So it has to seek something to conflict with it, to draw more, to build more energy out of. Just the natural, that's why the ego is like, I must tell just how bad this was to the person. I must do it because right now, because it's I need to keep this going, sort of. And it's not that the human is going, I need to keep this going. It's the ego. It uses emotionality at the lower, like in falsity, it uses emotionality to empower its own creations, is how it sort of works. So the more emotion, the more powerful.
It's an interrupter to just go deep into the hurt. Where's the deepest
Exactly. Hurt? Yeah. You want to interrupt that process before the ego takes over.
Yeah.
And because from that lower perspective, you're not able to see really the truth of what's going on. And so it becomes both of our responsibilities on the sender or the receiver. The sender has to try to initially send from a place of positivity and expansion, if they can. And if they can't, the receiver has to try to receive from positivity and expansion. So what are they getting at with, what is their fear getting at? Like, because as our partner, if we have an open eyes and we're balanced, we'll be able to see where the fear is truly coming from. We'll be able to see it for what it is.
Yes.
Which is just maybe a loneliness or whatever it is.
Yep.
And And these things, if we see loneliness in someone we love, how do we respond? Right? We respond to come close to them and to help them. Like, so it becomes very clear what the answer is love. But we have to, like you said, there's a system interruption that has to happen before the ego starts running off. Otherwise the frequency dips, and then those opportunities to see things properly don't come as easily until someone goes, what the frig's going on?
Yeah.
This is nonsense. And then they'll make the overture of some kind of I'm back, I'm here, I'm open.
Yeah. Yes.
And then it gets fixed. So, but stopping it as quickly as you can in the chain reduces the overall catalyst. But also reflecting on it, it's important to know too, that however many times this went back and forth, it just means like it's a hard thing. We've been doing the same thing with other people for decades. So it's built into us to be these ways and, to defend ourselves and to
survival.
Yeah. It's built into us, not just this life, other lives. And, even in the human like organism evolved from animals right. So even back that far, it's only about survival. That's like where the ego sort of started. Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much to it. And you can just let go that, like we've been doing like some funny mistakes, like just laugh at them if you can.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good way to know that you're kind of over it, is if you can look at it and just kind of giggle about it. That's a good way to just be like, yeah, okay, we're both over it. It's kind of funny to us. If it's funny to one and the other's not really giggling, then maybe there's something there still.
And I feel like we've been doing this practice quite a bit, where after something like this, we might have a conversation where we're like, oh, I can see I could do this better, rather than like really focusing on the other person. Just like look at yourself and, oh, I can see now that I've kind of slept on it and I have some sort of clear eyes towards it. I could do this differently. I could do this a bit better. I see this about myself. I see what comes up for me. I see my fear. I see just constantly, this practice of self-reflection.
Yeah. Doing it without like really criticizing too much, just noticing.
Yeah. Just observing yourself, as a human animal.
Trying to do that before offering advice, or like what seems to be the go-to is often, what can the other person do to make me feel better? And there's usually a bunch of different things you can think of, right? But truly the thing is probably to figure out how to feel better within yourself about it, and then discuss it.
Right. And then what sort of energetically happens is the other person will usually do the same too. And then you're both kind of...
It ends up solving itself, sort of.
It solves itself. Yeah.
And even that person you may not even say anything, and then the thing just stops. Like, I actually think sometimes spirit just like almost puppets us to say certain things or deliver something in a certain way just to get the other one like, oh, blah, blah. I literally think that happens because
to have the catalyst. And
there's been times where like both of us had said sentences or particular words that we don't use. And like, they were just like, it's weird that I said this at all. And I regret it or whatever, but it's, and we've both kind of done that a bit. So, it like, it's all good. It's all about vulnerability. And I think the vulnerability is like the way to go, really. I think it's in order to have the openness, you have to establish trust and faith in each other. So it's like kind of, if you just keep moving towards vulnerability, then, either you can handle it or you can't.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
It really starts with inner intimacy.
Yeah. Like you have to be okay with your own.
You establish inner intimacy first. Like whatever is arising in me, I accept it. I'm not going to judge it.
I honor what it is.
And maybe I don't act on it. Maybe this is something that moved through me, but I hold inner intimacy. I'm not turning away from myself.
That's the real trick that I find is the most important trick, is like, we feel our feelings, we honor them, they are what they are and are real to us, but they may be coming from somewhere that is not true.
Serving us, yeah.
And not serving us. And we want to serve the truth.
Yeah.
So we want to, we talk about this a lot, but we want to feel exactly what it is, just as it is, not try to reject it or push it away or say it's not appropriate for us, or, you know, we want to try to accept ourselves. And that's how we start to learn to do it too, is we start to accept that this is how I feel. I guess it's okay to say it, because I guess you first have to accept this is how I feel to even. You
have to be vulnerable with yourself first.
You have to notice how you truly feel, which is already vulnerable.
Right. The vulnerable communication is really the second step. It's the ability to be transparent and intimate with ourselves.
Yeah.
That we foster first. And then you can't really be intimate with anyone else if you're not first intimate with yourself.
If you don't know yourself.
Yeah. And accept yourself and honor, you can't, it's not going to happen with someone else. So
you're going to be in a reactivity type state probably too.
Whatever is happening in your external relationship is always a reflection of your relationship with yourself.
Yes. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Alrighty. Thank you so much. If you resonated with this video, we so appreciate a like or a comment, or to subscribe to the channel, and just so many blessings and love to everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.